There was a program I used to love watching. It was called Mythbusters. And in that program, a couple of guys used to take a myth and really find out if it was true or not. And in a large number of cases, it wasn't necessarily valid. There's one or two myths about the golf swing and the golf club and shot profiles that I like to discuss here. The first is that when you go to make a draw or a fade, for a draw you put the ball back in your stance, for a fade you put the ball forward in your stance. It'll certainly work, but it requires a little bit of wrist manipulation and adjustments that are beyond the scope and skill of a lot of golfers. If we take a look at the typical club head path, it goes from in to square to in again. Now, if a draw is done where the club head is closed and a fade is done when the club head is open, where in this golf swing is the club head open and where is it closed? Essentially, it's open towards the early part of the distance between the feet, if I can call it that. It goes then square and then it closes over again. So logic would suggest that if you want to hit the ball with a fade, you should really hit it earlier in the swing rather than later, as proposed by various people. It's a much simpler way of doing it. It's a much easier way of doing it, and I think a lot of players could benefit from hitting a fade from here toward the trailing foot and hitting a draw from the leading foot rather than the other way around. The second myth that I would like to discuss is the actions of the body in relation to the start of the downswing. Now, a lot of people say that you should start the downswing with a lateral body shift, particularly the bottom half should slide over and give momentum for the hands. There needs to be movement in the golf swing, obviously, as in most other sports, basketball, baseball, tennis, cricket, you name it. But it's a case of not how much there is of forward movement, but when it takes place in the golf swing. And what we have here is a very well-known golfer, and if we compare the starting positions with his position halfway up the backswing, you see there's not that much bottom half movement. We then get to the top of the backswing, and again, there's not really all that much bottom half movement. It's relatively static, it's relatively still. So he's not creating a great deal of sideways movement. And if we take the top of the backswing, where the club shaft is basically horizontal, we see that the bottom half hasn't moved all that far. It hasn't slid. It has rotated onto the trailing leg, but we haven't gone outside the trailing leg as far as the weight shift is concerned. That's a very, very valid position, and it's a position that a lot of golfers can copy. What we're talking about is the start of the downswing. And we see here that this particular player has very, very little lateral movement of the bottom body half. And in its place, or before it happens, there's a drop of the hands into, if you like, putting the club into a pocket, or putting the hands into a pocket on the downswing. If the body starts to slide over, it creates too much of a lag and gets what forces players into what Tiger used to refer to as a ole kind of move. In other words, trying to catch up with the movement of the hands. We see here that if we compare the start of the downswing with the backswing, very, very little body movement. And then we go further on to the point where his bottom half is starting to really take an influence in the golf swing. And we see that he's, even then, even when the club shaft is coming through into impact, there isn't really all that much movement, maybe I guess 6 inches of the bottom half. But in essence, that lateral movement took place later in the swing rather than earlier in the swing. Again, start the downswing with an arms drop, a hands drop, and then once that's done, then the bottom half can go through quite successfully. Here's another view of a relatively well-known player, and as he gets to the top of the backswing, we can see quite clearly that his knees have rotated, his bottom half has rotated. But as we start the downswing, we see that he starts with the arms drop there. Now, even when he's done his arms drop prior to a real body movement, his knees are still parallel with the flight line, or just a little bit open. They're not massively open. He hasn't slid over. He hasn't really got aggressive with the bottom half until he's put that top half into the position that he wants. And once that's done, then he can afford to let the bottom half do some work. But even then, there's not a lot of bottom half movement. The knees are slightly open, the hips are slightly open, but the shoulders are dead straight parallel with the intended line or the intended flight of the golf ball. So these two myths, I hope they are busted, and I hope that people can realize that you can manufacture a fade by hitting it earlier in the downswing. You can manufacture a draw by hitting a little later in the downswing, and you should start that downswing with a hands drop, an arms drop, getting into that pocket before there is any great rotational movement of the bottom half.